Welcome to Factastic Stories. In this episode, we'll be taking a trip through time to learn about some incredible things that have shaped our world. From the mysterious origins of the vampire legend in New England to the amazing invention that changed the way we eat bread, we'll be uncovering some truly amazing stories. We'll also be exploring the tactics used by colonial powers to maintain their control over far-flung territories, including the fascinating tale of a faked battle that allowed the Spanish to keep their grip on Manila. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be amazed by the incredible stories that history has to tell. What law makes it impossible for giant monsters like King Kong to exist? According to the square cube law, when an object is scaled proportionally, its volume increases proportional to the cube of the scaling factor, while its surface area increases proportional to the square of the scaling factor. Applied to living creatures, this law leads to a fundamental difference in the skeletal and muscular systems of animals that differ greatly in size. If an arbitrary animal is enlarged, for example, by a factor of 10, its weight will increase by a factor of 1000, while the cross-sectional area of its bones and muscles will only increase by a factor of 100. Therefore, the skeleton simply cannot withstand the load, and the respiratory system will not be able to function. Thus, fictional giant insects or monsters like King Kong, mechanically scaled without taking into account the square cube law, could not exist. What animals can stimulate others to reproduce asexually? If you remove the anemone from one of the claws of a boxer crab, it will divide the other claw into two parts by stretching it out and cutting it in half with its legs. Then both halves regenerate, turning into fully functional symbiotic anemones once again. Crab often do not look for their first anemone in the vicinity, but take it away in a fight from other crabs. Which font contributed to the resignation of the Prime Minister of Pakistan? In the Microsoft Office 2007 package, the default font was changed from Times New Roman to the specially designed font Calibri. There are several cases known from judicial practice where it was used as evidence of forgery. The most high-profile such case was investigated in Pakistan against then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Defending himself against corruption charges, he presented to the court documents signed in 2006 and typed in the Calibri font, which, in combination with other evidence, led to a guilty verdict and his removal from office. Which company, named after its co-founder, was he forced to work as a mechanic in? Engineer and racer Louis Chevrolet became a co-founder of the Chevrolet Company in 1911. 5 years later, he sold his share and went on to establish several other automobile companies. Shortly after the start of the Great Depression, Louis went bankrupt and was forced to work as a mechanic at the Chevrolet plant in Detroit, where he died in poverty in 1941. How is altruism expressed in the behavior of parrots? Scientists have identified the presence of altruism in jacaranda parrots. To do this, they placed them in a glass two-compartment cage. Each compartment had two holes, one of which was used to give the parrot metal rings as currency, while the other hole allowed the bird to exchange rings for a treat. The rooms in the cage were also connected, and if one of the parrots saw that their neighbor's hole for receiving rings was closed, they would give them some of their own rings. However, if both of the neighbor's holes were closed, the parrot would stop sharing because such assistance would no longer make sense. What company played a prank on Americans by announcing the purchase of the Statue of Liberty? On April 1, 1996, the fast food chain Taco Bell announced that it had purchased the Statue of Liberty in Philadelphia and renamed it the Taco Liberty Bell. The advertisement claimed that the national symbol would now be moved every 6 months to the company's headquarters in California. A flurry of phone calls from Americans forced the National Park Service to hold a press conference and refute the rumors. Despite the scandal caused by the prank, the number of visitors to Taco Bell noticeably increased that week. What did Ronaldo apologize to the mothers of his fans for? Before the semifinals of the 2002 World Cup, Brazilian footballer Ronaldo shaved his head, leaving a semicircular fringe. Later he explained that he made this decision in order to shift the attention of journalists who constantly asked him about his leg injury. 19 years later, Ronaldo apologized to all the mothers whose children followed the example of their idol and got the same terrible hairstyle. What was the closest common ancestor of all the hereditary European monarchs known for? Johann Wilhelm Friso, Prince of Orange-Nassau, ruled in the late 17th and early 18th centuries under the titles of Prince of Nassau-Dietz, Stadtholder of Friesland and Groningen, and Baron of Breda. It was he, along with his wife, Maria Louise, who is the closest common ancestor of all current hereditary European monarchs who hold the throne by inheritance. Why did Elvis Presley fans send letters with stamps honoring the singer to non-existent addresses? In 1993, the American Postal Service released commemorative stamps in honor of Elvis Presley. Fans began sending letters with these stamps to non-existent addresses en masse. The letters were then returned to the senders with the stamp, "Return to Sender," which is also the name of Presley's 1962 hit song. Why was it fashionable among English aristocrats to limp during the Victorian era? Princess Alexandra of Denmark, the wife of the future British King Edward VII, began to limp in her youth after suffering from rheumatism. Women in English aristocratic circles looked up to Alexandra in fashion matters, and along with clothing, they began to imitate her limp. To make the limp as noticeable as possible, they wore shoes from different pairs, and shoe manufacturers quickly caught on and started selling special pairs with different heel heights on the right and left shoes. Which athlete ran a marathon at the Olympics with an official time of more than 54 years? One of the participants in the marathon at the 1912 Olympics in Stockholm was Japanese athlete Shizo Kanekori. Unable to properly recover before the race after a long journey and suffering from the heat, Kanekori lost consciousness halfway through the distance and received help from a local farming family, before returning to Japan without notifying anyone. In Sweden, Kanekori was considered missing for a long time, and it was only more than 50 years later that journalists discovered that he had participated in several Olympic marathons. He was then offered to officially finish the Stockholm race, to which the Japanese athlete agreed and finished with a time of 54 years, 8 months, 6 days, 5 hours, 32 minutes and 20.3 seconds. In what technological process are mollusks used as living sensors? Mollusks are used as living sensors in the technological process of water supply systems in Warsaw and some other Polish cities. Water that is supposed to enter the city water supply system is directed towards them, and if it contains any pollutants such as heavy metals or pesticides, the mollusk shells close. A computer system tracks this using coils and magnets installed on the shells and automatically shuts off the water supply until the necessary analyses are carried out by specialists. A similar technology is implemented in the water supply system of St. Petersburg, but the employees here are river crayfish, whose heart rate is monitored. What disease did people in New England used to consider victims of vampires? The infectious nature of tuberculosis was proven in the late 19th century. But before that, there were various explanations for the cause of the disease. In several states in New England, there was a belief that those suffering from tuberculosis were victims of vampires. A common scenario for the development of the disease was the infection of one family member and their death against the backdrop of the fading health of other infected relatives. In such cases, the deceased's grave could be opened, and if the corpse appeared poorly decomposed, they were blamed for sucking energy from the still living. To protect them, the deceased's internal organs could be removed and burned, and their head could be chopped off. In which country can you get the contents of some vending machines for free in case of emergencies? In Japan, there is one of the highest densities of vending machines per capita in the world. According to an agreement between the companies that operate them and the authorities, special vending machines with a power source were installed at train stations, subway stations, and other public places. In case of emergencies and power outages, these machines switch to an emergency mode and dispense food and drinks for free. What innovation became a benchmark for evaluating inventions in the English language? Sliced bread appeared on the shelves of American stores in 1928, shortly after Otto Frederick Rohwedder invented and brought to industrial use an automatic machine. Within 5 years, 80% of bread in the US was sold sliced. The innovation was so popular with the public that in the English language, the idiom, "greatest thing since sliced bread," became entrenched as a benchmark for inventions. Which colonial power staged a fake battle to avoid handing over the city to local rebels? The action of the Spanish-American War of 1898 unfolded, in part, in the Philippines, at that time a Spanish colony. American troops, together with Filipino rebels, had besieged Manila for several months, and on August 13, the final battle for the city unfolded. However, prior to the battle, the Spanish, realizing that the surrender of the city was inevitable, secretly arranged with the Americans to simulate combat so that only the Americans would enter the inner part of the capital, while the rebels remained outside the walls. They were unable to completely avoid gunfire, but the number of casualties was minimal. 19 Americans out of a contingent of over 10,000 and 49 Spaniards out of a garrison of 13,000. The following year, a rebellion broke out among the local population against the American occupation, which ended unsuccessfully, and the Philippines gained independence only in 1946. Thank you for tuning in to Factastic Stories. We hope you enjoyed traveling through time with us and learning about the amazing events that have shaped our world. From the mysterious origins of the vampire legend to the incredible invention that changed the way we eat bread, there's always something fascinating to learn about history. We also explored interesting facts about animal behavior, fonts, company pranks, and even fashion trends among English aristocrats. We hope you learned something new and interesting today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Thank you for watching.